My name is Jonathan Feinstein. I serve as the Texas State Director with an organization called the Education Trust for a middle school educator. A lot of our work is at the center of really research and advocacy to inform policy making. And I can't personally think of a more important issue for us to be talking about for the students of the state, the future of the state, which is right following more than 2 years of unprecedented disruption. How are we going to support long-term learning recovery for all students while we continue to focus on closing gaps for the students who are and were furthest behind before the pandemic? Dr. Bryan mentioned the STAR results. I don't want to bury the lead, and I'm not going to go into incredible detail. I'm sure a lot of you have started to dig in or at least read the headlines that are going to give us the opportunity just to start to better understand what's working, what still needs improvement, and how our schools are serving students. I think the dedication, the hard work, the resiliency of teachers, of families, and last but not least, the students themselves across the state have shown that there's some good news. I think especially in reading, we're starting to see that across all student groups, they surpassed their pre-pandemic levels of proficiency. I don't think that should be glossed over by any stretch. There's tremendous work that includes a lot of the policy decisions that y'all have been a part of making that have put students in that position. But as you chart the path forward, I think I'm here to ask you to please guard against complacency. I know you won't be tempted into that, and to really refuse to accept pre-pandemic reality as the bar, right, as the goal for our schools or as the ceiling for students. So y'all know this, but as a reminder, when we look at the new data from 2022 STAR, students from low-income backgrounds, 41% are on grade level in reading and 30% in math. That's where we are now as we kind of have our rose-colored glasses on about the progress we've made. And then when we zoom in, right, and disaggregate that further, for African-American students in Texas, it's only a quarter of students who are on grade level in math. And across race and income, right, however you want to cut it, the gaps are still over 25 percentage points. Doesn't matter what grade or subject matter you look at. So I just think it's important that as we have a conversation, we be really clear about where we are and where we all want to get to. So I think now is the time to focus the resources, time, talent, money on continuing to develop mastery for students who were furthest behind. And this was mentioned, I think, during the 45-45 discussion, potentially really narrowing in on those critical subjects, on those critical grades, maybe even some critical skills, using research-backed strategies. And, I was here last session. EdTrust presented 2 strategies that we think give students the best opportunity and support they need. We call it targeted intensive tutoring, but high-impact tutoring, and expanded learning time. And again, I think to your credit, the legislature has had the intent of really figuring out how do we turn that research and that evidence into good policy that can be implemented. Just to quickly recap that research, effective targeted tutoring can as much as double the amount of learning that students typically gain during the school year. The research is clear on ratios. We can want to believe, and I would love to see new examples of where that is happening, because we could all stand to gain a lot from that. But 2 students per tutor is certainly the most efficient and effective. And it's hard to find examples in the research where more than 4 has been shown to really accelerate learning. Time matters too. Again, the same base of research. Usually between 44 to 100 hours of additional instruction have that impact on student learning. The most effective interventions involve usually multiple times a week and usually for 30 to 60 minutes each. So there are studies that have actually found little evidence that once a week tutoring is sufficient to generate meaningful gains. So I think just continuing to refer and learn from the research is important. And again, I won't recap 45-45, some of which y'all have heard already. But I think it's clear that new policy solutions were needed. They still are needed. Remediation has not proven effective over time. nor, frankly, has grade retention at wide scale. And I think I would applaud 4545 also for protecting students' access to enrichment, opportunities to recess, to physical activity. Um, of course, it's necessary, right, to balance what the evidence says and is most effective with what's feasible. And I get from tracking the conversation that that's where you are really headed. I do think it's important to remind all of us that our schools are not without significant, albeit temporary, financial resources to make some of this happen. Money can't solve everything. We know that time and people matter, but just for a refresher, Texas school systems were allocated more than $11 billion in federal ESSER 3 funds, including $2.2 billion, which were dedicated to address unfinished learning, and TEA has allocated another $1.2 billion, 620 million of which was to be directed for the same purpose. You've already heard about some of the House Bill 3 interventions that, frankly, they're also evidence-based strategies for addressing unfinished learning. So additional days school year allotment. You're going to hear, I think, after us from Dallas ISD. I was looking at some of the data they've got as they've stood up their ADSI program. Listen to this. 82% of participating students feel more prepared for schoolwork, and 84% report stronger relationships with adults in their schools. That tells me a lot. And when they ask teachers, they say that they are benefiting from more planning time, more collaboration time, and the opportunities for small group instruction. These are all things that benefit addressing unfinished learning. And of course, the teacher incentive allotment, which you heard about earlier, I would tell you, I think it's important for school systems to continue to evaluate not just how teachers are assigned across campuses, but even to courses within schools to ensure that students who are behind are accessing high quality instruction in their grade level and in their instructional support classes. There are a lot of schools in a lot of places where students who are behind grade level are not necessarily getting the most effective instruction possible during their regular class and even in the additional instructional time. And TIA was designed to help address that very issue. So I just close with a few considerations. One, I think robust feedback and data. There's a lot we still need to learn, including instructional calendars, like what are school districts doing to provide that additional time. I think student attendance, the growth on interim assessments that have been measured, that have been mentioned, are really needed to better understand what is working, and again, to make sure school systems have what they need to continue quality implementation. This is not about compliance. This should always be about quality implementation. The second consideration I'd say is, we've heard it a lot, if schools are relying exclusively on their existing teacher workforce to serve as tutors, then we're not doing it the way we need to. There's also research that, yes, while certified teachers are the most effective, paraprofessionals can be extremely effective. Those exploring are already enrolled in teacher preparation programs, and even volunteers. They can do it effectively when they have high quality support, the training, the materials, and the low ratios. The ratios especially matter when you're not going to be leaning on those certified educators. Third thing I'll say is, every school system, every community looks different, but we all have assets in our local communities. Those might be nonprofits, they might be faith-based organizations, they might be civic and business groups or alumni associations, but they often have an asset that is key and is key to accelerated learning, which is the strong relationships with students. And so I just think checking to make sure that school systems aren't missing those opportunities to leverage those partners is really, really important. And then I think it's been mentioned, if we're not looking beyond 2024, which I know in the next session, that's when those federal dollars are going to go away. Thinking about what are the ways to help school systems sustain the implementation beyond that is really important. I mean, the stakes are really too high. I think we're beyond talking about just the generational kind of decline, but really, I think, accepting kind of the unfinished learning and the gaps that existed beforehand, before the pandemic. So with that, thank you for your time. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you.